But he's a famous name. In fact, Bush gave him the Medal of Freedom award last week in the White House with several other well-known people. I don't remember who the other people were. But since your question is Begin, let's go back to Begin. So Begin was the head of this one party that was supposed to be the successors to Jabotinsky. And when the state was formed, they had two armies. They had the Haganah from the kibbutzes that later became the official Israeli army. Then you had people in it like Dayan, Rabin, Yitzhak Rabin. All these people became prime ministers, except Dayan was considered too flamboyant, so he never got to be prime minister. But he was defense minister. He had the eye patch. He was foreign minister. He was lots of things. And then he and Sharon both went over to Begin as the right-wing party for a while, but they were always swinging back into the middle. This is what Olmert has done at the moment. He swung back into the middle, even though he was supposed to be a right-winger when he came in. And basically they destroyed the Jabotinsky party again by what Olmert and Sharon did with this new party called Kadima. That Sharon, Kadima means forward. In the army, you say, when you're charging a position in Israel, you say, Kadima, Kadima, you know, and you use that as a party. But when Sharon went into occultation or stroke situation, Olmert is the leader, and everyone hates Olmert. Nobody likes Olmert in Israel. They all think he's a totally inadequate, ridiculous person. And he's only the leader because of what happened to Sharon. And he was one of the ones who would follow Sharon and do his bidding for everything. People say Sharon withdrew from Gaza the way he did and destroyed all those people's houses and all the assurances that he gave. They weren't hurting anybody there. They were just on the outskirts doing farming. And now Gaza's become a center of missiles and terrorism, and they're loading in all kinds of missiles there and so on. There'll be some real trouble coming from Gaza before long, again. People say that it's because of his sons were involved in criminal activity and he knew they were going to be prosecuted, that if he made a deal with the left wing, the prosecutors would let up on his sons. And I think that's really what, a lot of what was behind what Sharon was doing to save his sons and stuff. One of Sharon's sons was accidentally shot by his revolver when he was young, playing with another friend of his. He may have been playing with his younger brother. I don't remember exactly what happened. Very great tragedy. And Sharon's first wife was in an automobile accident on the road from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, and some people say she purposely crashed into an oncoming car, and he ended up marrying her sister. And that's all very checkered Israel history past, but Sharon is a very strange sort of Israel product. And I told you that his father was in the Moshav movement, not the kibbutz movement. So you have the labor movement, which was really the people everyone thought was the Israeli government. Ben Gurion came out of the labor movement, and so you had the Labor Party. And then you had this right-wing party that had many names, but ultimately after the Six-Day War, 1967, Sharon came out of the army and spoke to Begin and got all the other different parties, liberal and so on, and they put it all together in this party that they called the Likud, the alliance. So you had Likud versus Labor. And then Likud came to power. And that was when Carter and Camp David and so on occurred. Now, Sharon destroyed his own party that he created, Likud, because it wasn't doing what he wanted them to do, and he was afraid that Netanyahu was going to get more power again, and he was very jealous of Netanyahu. Netanyahu had already been prime minister once, but he had some personal problems with his wife, and some weird things happened in terms of, I forget what the gossip in the press that caused his downfall, but he had some issues that caused his collapse, and then he was trying to recoup, and Sharon didn't want that to happen, and he realized that Netanyahu had more support in the Likud So he took the people that supported him, made an alliance with the centrist left-wing Labour Party, and started a new party that presently controls Israel called Kadima. But Kadima exists only on paper. The next election, it will probably dissolve and evaporate, and you'll go back to old-style Israeli politics, which will be basically the Jabotinsky party on the right. That's why I'm telling you all this, and the Labour-type people on the left. And that's how the alignment is set up in Israel to some extent. What was your question? Who had the question about what could they have done? You had the question. What was your question? Don't be afraid. Get your hand over your mouth, but nothing to be afraid of. She was asking me, I remember her question better than she does. She was asking in the break, what could they have done in the 30s? Well, I told you, they could have done in the 30s exactly what they did in the 40s after the Holocaust. But the Holocaust wouldn't have happened at the time of the 30s. They could have, as a whole unit, objected to the closing of the borders. And the British were not in a very good position then to do anything to, manpower-wise, given the threat from Germany and in Japan. There's not a lot that they would have been able to do to stop them. They could have done in the 30s what they did in the 40s. I don't understand what could have stopped them. Only ideologically, they weren't ready. They didn't realize what was coming, as you say. Well, should they have realized? Well, maybe it's hard. But people like Jabotinsky did seem to have a clear understanding of what was coming. And so, yes, he was not. You say, well, you see, they didn't support him. No, the British threw him out of Palestine, as they did Wingate and all other troublemakers, as they did the Mufti. But they basically froze the situation and closed the gates to immigration, and I think that sealed the fate of the Jews in Europe. Maybe they did, and I think they did it with malice, a forethought, because if you say that they didn't understand what they were doing, yeah, they didn't totally understand what was coming. But then after the war, they followed the same policy, so you can't say that they didn't understand what they were doing. If even after all that happened, they still had the gates closed and wouldn't open them, then you have to say that they understood very well what they were doing. And they were really, I think, terribly, what do you call it when someone isn't living up to their arrangements? Not guilty, but there's another word. Blameworthy maybe is the word. Not straightforward in what they were supposedly doing. Yeah.